Far, the Ukrainians have been given Javelin missiles. Those would go up against Russian tanks very successfully, but they don't necessarily have enough. This is video of Ukrainian forces on a number of the bridges that are going in and out of Kyiv that they're trying to stop the Russians on. We bring in Congressman Mike Garcia, former Navy pilot, graduate of Annapolis, with us now. Congressman, obviously, there's been a lot of difference of opinions in how we got to this point and how little we helped the Ukrainians. Is there anything unilaterally Congress can do other than simply authorize funds in order to get the Ukrainians help? Because without the president putting in more weapons to them, it doesn't make a difference, right?
Right. I think we do need to be pushing for stronger actions to be taken. This means both kinetic support, like you talked about, more strategic defense systems like Patriot batteries, as well as the equivalent of Iron Dome systems that Israel uses that we provide, as well as the tactical, like the man-pads and man-portable air defense systems and the Javelins and Stinger missiles that you outlined. But we also need to be providing a lot more than that. There's strategic, tactical surveillance and situational awareness tools where we position platforms that provide information into the network that the troops on the ground and in the air can use. And then we need a full boycott, divestment, and sanction program. Right now, I would describe our administration's strategy as one of big carrots and little sticks. And we have what I think is an anemic sanction package in response to this assault on the Ukraine. And we're still buying approximately $50 million worth of oil a day. We haven't kicked them out of the SWIFT banking program. And there are levers at our disposal that we should be pulling. And Congress needs to be firm in this. Both parties do. And this isn't a political issue. This is about the sovereignty of a nation and our Western allies, but also our world standing as a nation and as a premier superpower. If we don't do this correctly, like we did not do Afghanistan correctly, we are positioning China as the only premier superpower in a matter of years, if not months.
Yeah, you say if, as if there is still time to recover from this. Is there?
I don't think there's much that we can do from the outside right now. I do think it's very dangerous for government officials from our end to be saying we will not use force. I don't think we as a nation or as leaders of our government should ever say what we are not willing to do. We should never disclose that. And I believe Biden and his cabinet right now do need to be defining red lines to where we would actually get involved if they cross those red lines. Obviously, Article 5 infringements relative to our NATO allies, but also nuclear, biological, chemical, genocide attacks that are very real scenarios that play out. Yeah, we need to have all the options on the table. And right now, I praise the Ukrainians for what they're doing. There is no more noble cause and something that motivates you to fight than defense of your homeland, defense of your castle. They're the living embodiment of Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death," and they are willing to see that to the end, one way or the other. And we pray for their liberties.
Well, yeah, you make a very good point in terms of how the Ukrainians are holding out. Probably one of the reasons is so many of them remember what it was like to live under Soviet rule, which is what Vladimir Putin wants to bring back. They have a taste of freedom, and now they want to keep it. Do you share General Boykin's concerns of the use of tactical nuclear weapons if the Ukrainians are able to hold off the Russian plans?
I think it's a very real scenario. Look, I'm not one of these guys that thinks Putin is rational. I believe he is an irrational actor. That's why sanctions and the disincentives that we put on the table were not effective against him. And when you paint someone like this into a corner, and when this draws out into a bloody war over the course of several days and weeks, when he was expecting it to be 1 or 2 days, he does also keep the use of tactical nukes, as well as biological and chemical weapons, on the table. And there is nothing more shocking. And you know, I was a combat fighter pilot. I've seen combat. There is nothing more shocking than seeing your wingmen get vaporized over enemy territory. And that's what a lot of Russian pilots are experiencing. There's the blood of 2,400 Russians now in the soil of the Ukrainian lands. And this is going to have a blowback on Putin's support in his homeland. And he's going to be questioned internally and organically, frankly, within his own cabinet and his own government. And it's pushing him into a corner. So we need to be prepared for these types of scenarios, and it's not going to get better before it gets worse.
Yeah, you make a great point in terms of Vladimir Putin being cornered because of just how well and how heroically and how bravely the Ukrainians have fought. One thing that's clear from the Russian battle plan is that they thought they were going to have air superiority almost immediately. There's now reports from the Ukrainian defense minister, they continue to shoot down Russian planes, Russian transports, Russian fighter jets. There is this lore that is out there now about one fighter pilot here, the ghost of Kyiv, haunting Russians, shooting down 6 Russians. This is a picture of one of the kind of planes he was flying. Does that jive, or is this sort of the lore of a very brave Air Force continuing to fight despite most of their airports being bombed out?
I think it's a very real possibility. I think we're still trying to confirm this. It gives hope to the folks on the ground, and hearing the sound of fighter jets overhead, and you know that they're friendlies and your guys supporting you as someone on the ground, as a soldier in combat. That is the great hope that they need and look forward to. And I think it's a very real scenario. Look, it's very difficult in the modern age, especially with the tools and the platforms that Russia has, to establish air dominance in an area like the Ukraine. They are not an anemic Air Force. They're outnumbered for sure, close to 10-1 in terms of fighter and strike aircraft relative to the Russians. But they have good networks. They have good strategies and tactics, and they are, in my opinion, being provided excellent situational awareness and intelligence from the countries around them. And that's why it's important for us to have a presence, to have F-35s on the northern, southern, east, and western borders, to be critical nodes in the network, so that we are actually contributing to their defense, their situational awareness, and ultimately, hopefully, to their success on the ground and in the air.
Yeah, as we talk, the battle for Kyiv continues. Congressman, we appreciate the time.
Right.
Thank you, and the perspective of somebody who's been there in the air. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Leland. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.